You know that feeling when you sit down to play just one quick game of Tetris and suddenly 3 hours have vanished into thin air. You're not alone. Millions of people across the globe have fallen victim to the hypnotic pull of falling blocks, and there's actually a scientific reason why this seemingly simple puzzle game has such an iron grip on our minds. But here's what's really fascinating. The addictive power of Tetris wasn't some happy accident. It wasn't just lucky game design or perfect timing. The truth is far more intriguing than that, and it reaches deep into the very fabric of how our brains are wired to seek patterns, completion, and reward. What if I told you that the secret to Tetris's addictive nature was discovered decades before the game was even created? What if the psychological principles that make those falling blocks so irresistible were actually uncovered by researchers studying completely different phenomena? And what if understanding these secrets could reveal something profound about human nature itself? I'm about to take you on a journey through the hidden psychology behind one of the most successful games ever created. By the end of this exploration, you'll understand exactly why you can't stop playing, why your brain craves those perfect line clears, and how a simple Soviet computer programmer accidentally stumbled upon one of the most powerful psychological mechanisms known to science. This isn't just about gaming. This is about understanding the deepest drives that motivate human behavior, and how those drives can be harnessed in ways that feel almost supernatural in their power. The story begins in 1984, but not where you might expect. While Alexei Pajitnov was coding the first version of Tetris in Moscow, researchers thousands of miles away were making discoveries that would explain exactly why his creation would become a global phenomenon. These scientists had no idea they were uncovering the blueprint for digital addiction. Dr. Burhus Frederick Skinner had been dead for 6 years by the time Tetris was born, but his ghost haunts every single game session. Skinner's work on operant conditioning and variable reward schedules had revealed something terrifying about human psychology. He discovered that the most addictive reward pattern wasn't giving people what they wanted all the time, or even most of the time. The most addictive pattern was giving people what they wanted just often enough to keep them coming back for more. This is where things get really interesting. Skinner's experiments with pigeons and rats showed that random, unpredictable rewards created behaviors that were almost impossible to extinguish. The animals would keep pressing levers, keep performing tasks, keep trying again and again because they never knew when the next reward might come. Sound familiar? Every time you drop a piece in Tetris, you're essentially pulling a lever in Skinner's experiment. Sometimes you get the satisfaction of clearing a line. Sometimes you get the massive dopamine hit of clearing 4 lines at once, but most of the time you just get the mild tension of another piece added to your growing tower. But Skinner's variable reward schedule is just the beginning. The real genius of Tetris lies in how it exploits something even more fundamental about human cognition, something that researchers call the Zeigarnik effect, named after Soviet psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik, who discovered it in the 1920s. Zeigarnik noticed something peculiar about human memory. People had a much better recall for tasks they hadn't finished compared to tasks they had completed. It was as if the human brain had a built-in mechanism that kept unfinished business at the forefront of consciousness, nagging away like a persistent itch that demanded to be scratched. This effect explains why you can't stop thinking about that one awkward conversation from 3 weeks ago, or why you wake up at night remembering that email you forgot to send. Your brain is literally designed to be bothered by incomplete tasks. Now imagine a game where completion is theoretically possible but practically impossible, where every single move creates new, incomplete patterns that your brain desperately wants to resolve, where the game state is perpetually unfinished with gaps that need to be filled and lines that need to be cleared. This is the diabolical beauty of Tetris. It's not just a game, it's a Zeigarnik effect generator. Every partially filled row is an unfinished task screaming at your subconscious. Every oddly shaped piece is a puzzle piece that your brain knows has a solution somewhere in the future. The game creates an endless cascade of incomplete patterns that your mind feels compelled to resolve. But even this isn't the full story. The real secret weapon of Tetris taps into something even more primal than our need for completion. It exploits what cognitive scientists call our pattern recognition system. The same system that allowed our ancestors to survive by spotting predators in tall grass and finding food in complex environments. Human beings are pattern-seeking machines. We see faces in clouds, hear voices in static, and find meaning in random events. This isn't a bug in our mental software, it's a feature. Our survival depended on our ability to quickly identify patterns and make predictions about the world around us. Tetris presents us with a constant stream of spatial patterns that need to be recognized and solved. Every piece that falls is a pattern recognition challenge. Where does this L-shaped piece fit? How can I use this long, straight piece most effectively? Can I set up a combination that will clear multiple lines? Your brain treats each of these challenges like a survival problem that needs to be solved immediately. The same neural pathways that once helped humans navigate dangerous environments are now being hijacked by falling blocks. And here's where it gets really devious. The game doesn't just present you with patterns to recognize, it presents you with patterns that are almost perfect. That row with just one empty space, that tower that's almost tall enough to clear 4 lines at once, that configuration that's just one piece away from being exactly what you need. This creates what psychologists call approach avoidance conflict. You're simultaneously drawn to the potential reward and anxious about the potential failure. Your brain is caught in a constant state of tension between hope and fear, between the promise of satisfaction and the threat of game over. This tension is incredibly powerful because it mirrors the same emotional state that motivates most human achievement. It's the feeling of being close to success but not quite there yet. It's the psychological space where motivation lives and thrives. But perhaps the most insidious aspect of Tetris's psychological design is how it exploits our relationship with time itself. The game creates what researchers call a flow state, a psychological condition where your sense of time becomes distorted and your attention becomes completely absorbed in the task at hand. Flow states are naturally occurring psychological phenomena that humans find deeply satisfying. They're the mental state you enter when you're completely engrossed in a challenging but achievable task. Athletes call it being in the zone. Artists call it inspiration. Psychologists call it one of the most addictive states the human mind can experience. Tetris is essentially a flow state machine. The game's difficulty scales automatically with your skill level. As you get better at recognizing patterns and making quick decisions, the pieces fall faster, maintaining that perfect balance between challenge and ability that keeps you locked in flow. And once you're in flow, time becomes irrelevant. Minutes feel like seconds. Hours disappear without notice. Your brain's normal time-keeping mechanisms are overwhelmed by the constant stream of small decisions and rapid rewards that the game provides. This is why you can sit down to play one quick game and suddenly find yourself wondering where the entire evening went. You weren't just playing a game. You were experiencing a chemically induced altered state of consciousness. The convergence of all these psychological principles, variable reward schedules, the Zeigarnik effect, pattern recognition, approach avoidance, conflict, and flow states creates something unprecedented in human experience. It's a perfect storm of cognitive exploitation that makes Tetris not just entertaining but genuinely addictive in the clinical sense of the word. But understanding these mechanisms raises an important question. If we know exactly how Tetris manipulates our psychology, why does it still work? Why can't we simply recognize the tricks and become immune to them? The answer to that question reveals something profound about the nature of human consciousness itself. And it's where our story takes its most surprising turn. The reason we can't simply think our way out of Tetris's grip is because these psychological mechanisms operate below the level of conscious awareness. They're hardwired into neural pathways that evolved over millions of years, and they respond to stimuli faster than our rational mind can intervene. Think about it this way. You know that touching a hot stove will burn you, but if you accidentally place your hand on one, you'll still jerk it away before your conscious mind even registers the pain. The reflex happens in your spinal cord, completely bypassing your brain's decision-making centers. Tetris exploits psychological reflexes that work in much the same way. When you see a gap that needs to be filled, your pattern recognition system activates automatically. When you're one piece away from clearing 4 lines, your reward anticipation circuits fire up whether you want them to or not. When you're in the middle of a game, your brain's completion drive kicks in with the same involuntary intensity as pulling your hand away from that hot stove. This is why knowing about these mechanisms doesn't make you immune to them. It's like knowing how a magic trick works, but still being fooled when you watch it performed. The cognitive machinery that processes the illusion operates independently of the logical mind that understands the method. But there's an even deeper layer to this psychological puzzle. The most insidious aspect of Tetris's design isn't just how it exploits individual psychological mechanisms. It's how it creates a feedback loop that strengthens these mechanisms over time. Every time you play, you're not just experiencing these psychological effects, you're training your brain to respond more strongly to them. Neuroscientists call this synaptic plasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself based on repeated experiences. The more you play Tetris, the more sensitive your brain becomes to the specific patterns of stimulation that the game provides. This creates something that researchers have dubbed the Tetris Effect, a phenomenon where people who play the game extensively begin to see Tetris-like patterns in the real world. They start imagining how objects on store shelves could be rearranged to fit together perfectly. They see falling leaves and think about how they could be rotated to fill empty spaces. They dream about falling blocks. The Tetris effect isn't just a curiosity. It's evidence of something profound happening in the brain. The game is literally rewiring neural pathways, creating new connections and strengthening existing ones in ways that persist long after the game is turned off. This neuroplasticity explains why Tetris becomes more addictive the more you play, not less. Unlike other forms of entertainment that might lose their appeal through repetition, Tetris becomes more compelling because it's actively reshaping the brain to find the game's patterns more rewarding. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. The same neuroplasticity that makes Tetris so addictive also makes it uniquely therapeutic. Researchers have discovered that the game's pattern-matching demands and spatial reasoning challenges can actually be used to treat certain psychological conditions. Studies have shown that playing Tetris can reduce the intensity of traumatic memories, help with addiction recovery, and even improve spatial intelligence. The game's ability to create flow states and demand focused attention makes it a powerful tool for mental rehabilitation. This dual nature of Tetris reveals something important about the mechanisms we've been discussing. The psychological principles that make the game addictive aren't inherently good or bad. They're tools that can be used for different purposes depending on the context and intention. The variable reward schedules that keep you playing for hours can also be used to motivate positive behavioral changes. The pattern recognition challenges that hijack your attention can also be used to improve cognitive function. The flow states that make time disappear can also be used to achieve peak performance in other areas of life. This brings us to perhaps the most important insight about Tetris's psychological power. The game isn't just exploiting random quirks of human psychology, it's tapping into fundamental drives that exist for good evolutionary reasons. Our need for completion helped our ancestors finish important survival tasks. Our pattern recognition abilities helped them navigate complex environments. Our reward-seeking behavior helped them find food and avoid danger. Our ability to enter flow states helped them perform complex tasks under pressure. Tetris succeeds because it provides a safe, controlled environment where these ancient drives can be satisfied without real-world consequences. It's a kind of psychological playground where we can exercise mental muscles that might otherwise go unused in modern life. But this also means that the game's addictive power comes with a hidden cost. Every hour spent satisfying these drives in the artificial environment of Tetris is an hour not spent satisfying them in the real world. The game provides a substitute satisfaction that can crowd out more meaningful forms of engagement. This substitution effect explains why Tetris can feel simultaneously satisfying and empty. The game provides genuine psychological rewards, but these rewards are divorced from any real-world achievement or progress. You can clear 1,000,000 lines and complete 1,000 games, but you haven't actually built anything or solved any real problems. The game creates what researchers call a hedonic treadmill, where increasing amounts of play are needed to achieve the same level of satisfaction. The more you play, the more you need to play to feel fulfilled, but the fulfillment itself becomes increasingly hollow. This is the true secret of Tetris's addictive power. It's not just that the game exploits psychological mechanisms, it's that it provides a perfect substitute for psychological needs that could be met in more meaningful ways. The game offers completion without accomplishment, pattern recognition without discovery, and flow states without growth. Understanding this mechanism doesn't just explain why Tetris is so compelling. It reveals something important about how modern technology interacts with ancient psychology. We're living in an era where our deepest psychological needs can be artificially satisfied by digital experiences that provide the neurochemical rewards of meaningful activity without the actual meaning. The falling blocks of Tetris represent something much larger than a simple puzzle game. They're a symbol of how human drives that evolved over millions of years can be redirected, exploited, and commodified by technologies that understand psychology better than we understand ourselves. And this is just the beginning. As we develop more sophisticated understanding of human psychology and more powerful technologies to exploit it, the principles that make Tetris so addictive will be applied to everything from social media platforms to educational software to workplace productivity tools. The secret origins of Tetris's power aren't just about understanding one game. They're about understanding the future of human technology interaction. And that future is being written in the language of falling blocks, one perfectly placed piece at a time. The implications of this understanding extend far beyond the realm of gaming. When we recognize that Tetris succeeded by accidentally stumbling upon the perfect combination of psychological triggers, we begin to see these same patterns everywhere in our digital landscape. Social media notifications operate on variable reward schedules. Streaming platforms exploit our completion drives with autoplay features. Mobile apps create artificial flow states that keep us scrolling endlessly through content. But here's what makes this revelation both fascinating and terrifying. The creators of these modern digital experiences didn't stumble upon these psychological principles by accident like Pajitnov did. They're deliberately engineering them into their products, armed with decades of research about human psychology and sophisticated data analytics that can measure user behavior down to the millisecond. This means that Tetris in many ways was the prototype for the attention economy that now dominates our digital lives. Those falling blocks weren't just entertaining millions of players, they were teaching an entire generation of technologists exactly how to capture and monetize human attention. The game's influence can be traced through the DNA of countless modern applications. The endless scroll of social media feeds mimics the continuous stream of falling pieces. The streak counters in fitness apps exploit the same completion drives that make you want to clear just one more line. The notification badges on our phones trigger the same pattern recognition systems that make us want to fit that perfectly shaped piece into place. What's particularly insidious is how these modern applications have refined and amplified the techniques that made Tetris so compelling. Where the original game provided satisfaction through genuine skill development and pattern mastery, many contemporary digital experiences provide hollow rewards that trigger the same neurochemical responses without any meaningful progression. This evolution represents a fundamental shift in how we interact with technology. We've moved from tools that enhance our capabilities to tools that exploit our psychological vulnerabilities. The line between helpful technology and digital manipulation has become increasingly blurred. Yet understanding these mechanisms also provides us with a form of liberation. When we recognize the psychological strings being pulled, we can begin to make more conscious choices about how we engage with digital experiences. We can seek out technologies that use these principles to genuinely enhance our lives rather than simply capture our attention. The story of Tetris teaches us that the most powerful technologies aren't necessarily the most complex ones. Sometimes the greatest innovations come from accidentally discovering how to align digital experiences with the deepest patterns of human psychology. Pajitnov's simple game of falling blocks revealed something profound about the nature of human motivation and desire. As we stand at the threshold of an era where artificial intelligence and machine learning will create even more sophisticated ways to understand and influence human behavior, the lessons of Tetris become more relevant than ever. The game serves as both a warning and a guide, showing us the incredible power that comes from understanding the hidden drives that shape human experience. The secret origins of Tetris's addictive power ultimately tell us something essential about ourselves. We are beings driven by ancient impulses in a modern world, seeking completion in an endless stream of digital fragments, finding meaning in the arrangement of virtual shapes, and discovering flow in the most unexpected places. Those falling blocks continue to captivate us not because they're particularly sophisticated, but because they speak to something timeless in the human experience. They remind us that beneath all our technological complexity, we're still pattern-seeking creatures hungry for completion, reward, and the satisfaction of a job well done. And perhaps that's the most important insight of all. In a world increasingly designed to exploit our psychological vulnerabilities, understanding the origins of that exploitation becomes an act of self-preservation. The next time you find yourself unable to stop playing, unable to stop scrolling, unable to stop clicking, remember the story of those falling blocks and ask yourself, what ancient drive is being satisfied, and is this the most meaningful way to satisfy it? The power of Tetris lies not in its complexity but in its simplicity. It succeeds because it offers us a pure, distilled experience of psychological satisfaction. Understanding that power gives us the tools to demand better from our technology and ultimately from ourselves